Welcome. Welcome to our Day of Social Justice with a special focus on AI. This event is hosted by the American Library Association Social Responsibilities Roundtable, or SRRT. SRRT believes that libraries and librarians must center social responsibility by recognizing and helping to solve social problems and inequities, work for the common good. My name is Olivia Blake. My pronouns are she, her, and I will be moderating today's session. Before I introduce the speakers, just a bit of housekeeping. To enable captions, click More in the bottom right of the screen and then click Show Captions. Our session today is being recorded and the recording will be available on our website within just a few weeks. Please be sure to keep your cameras off and mics off unless you are a presenter or posing a question during our Q&A portion. And we ask, please be respectful and extend care and compassion both to yourself and to others. We will have time for questions and answers after all presentations have concluded. Please use the Q&A feature on Zoom to pose your questions, and let's reserve the chat section to relay any tech issues, resource share-outs, and appreciation for our panelists. You can pop your questions into the Q&A as the presentations are rolling. You don't have to wait until the end or until they're completed with their presentations to do so. Now, without any further ado, this session focuses on the socio-environmental impacts of AI and future implications for human labor, opportunity, and advocacy. Our presenters, we have a number of them here today. We have Andrea Belair, the head of Metadata Services and Strategies from Smith College. Andrea Puglisi, Digital Initiatives Technology Librarian at Westfield State University and Privacy Advocate by Library Freedom Project. Elson Anderson, Reference and Instruction Librarian from Paul Robeson Library, Rutgers University Libraries. And Steve Fernandez, Massachusetts-based engineer. Beyond Intent Technologies do what they're designed to do. That's going to be our first presentation. Then we're going to hear from Karyn Pomerantz, retired health librarian and public health educator, from the new industrial revolution, the dark side of AI. And finally, we'll hear from Brandi Hart, interdisciplinary librarian, Librarians of the Future, diversity resident at the University of Colorado in Boulder, on what a cute tiger cub, the ethical ramifications of generative AI. So without further ado, I'm going to hand it over to our first presenter and get started. Thanks so much for being here.
Hello, I think I'm first. I'm going to share my screen. All right. Okay, so you can see it okay?
Yes.
All right, so hello, my name is Andrea Belair. I use she, her pronouns, and I'm the head of Metadata Services and Strategies at Smith College. I'd like to welcome you to our portion of this session, but I would like to start with a brief introductory note. This panel came from a similar one at the New England Archivist annual meeting in March 2025, from which two of the panelists have joined us again today. I'd facilitated that first panel to address questions I'd seen asked several times within and outside of my profession, but I never saw much in the way of answers. In response, a few of us put together a panel to help answer some of these questions, including an engineer, librarians, and archivists, and an investigative journalist. Today, as I said, we have two speakers from that earlier panel joining us again with an additional speaker. I'm only here to facilitate conversation since it is of interest to information workers, as well as the broader community. And I do not act as a representative of my institution, nor do any of the speakers here today in our session or our panel. So any opinions expressed in this session do not represent those of our affiliated institutions. We do, however, hope that this will inspire conversations among the audience so that they can take this information to their own contexts. And with that, We present Beyond Intent. Technologies do what they're designed to do. I'm going to mute myself and turn off my camera. So if I can, but we can continue.
All right, I will kick things off. Hi, everyone. Katie Anderson. My pronouns are she, her. I'm going to start off our discussion about technologies doing what they are designed to do. And what I'm going to address is they're designed to invade our privacy and empower technofascists. So technology is doing what they are designed to do. This is a feature and not a bug. And one of the things they are designed to do is to compromise our privacy. AI is more and more designed and used to harvest, consolidate, share, and exploit our personal data for profit, surveillance, and targeting. Some examples of how AI is being used to invade our privacy: facial recognition, predictive systems, loss of ownership of our image, our voice, and our intellectual property, collection of data, and use of that data that is not transparent. So every day there are countless examples of this. Some recent events that I'll just highlight. Some recent examples: Spotify was just called out for creating AI-generated songs of deceased artists. People using ChatGPT, a lot, you're probably aware of a lot of examples of folks who are using it to for mental health, for legal, for medical. So they might think that they are having a private conversation. And in fact, when I spoke with a vendor at ALA who was promoting this AI librarian, one of the reasons that was given to me for having this was that patrons would feel more comfortable talking to a computer rather than a person, because they would feel more private. However, people believe this, but Sam Altman, who's the CEO of OpenAI, recently in an interview admits that there's really no confidentiality, especially legal confidentiality. So people using ChatGPT for legal advice are actually creating more harm, because they're creating discoverable evidence, because OpenAI would have to share those when subpoenaed. Another sort of terrifying example of our privacy being compromised is that it was discovered that ChatGPT chats, the content of the chats, are appearing in Google search results, thus exposing all that sensitive data. Canvas, which is a popular course management software used in higher education, already harvests massive amounts of data on the students, and it recently partnered with OpenAI to add AI tools, which furthers their ability to get even more data. And it, right as of now, is pretty unclear what the privacy will be for that. People who are using AI agents who are being promoted, it's being promoted as, like, we'll help you do things, make appointments, such like that. That requires giving the AI agent access to your data, including logins and potentially sensitive information. So we must ask, is it worth the loss of our privacy to use these tools? Another alarming use of AI is the current administration's AI first approach. It's degrading the boundaries that have existed in order to protect our privacy. Control of our privacy gives us power. Erosion of privacy is in the best interest of those wishing to control, track, manipulate, and influence us, who are technofascists. Next slide, please. All right, so technofascists, very briefly. So another example of technologies that are doing exactly what they are designed to do is AI is designed to empower technofascists. AI is being used for political suppression of speech and to repress resistance. The venture capitalists and tech bros that are pushing AI, not only for their own profit, but also for power. There are, once again, daily examples of how AI tools are being used to undermine expertise, devalue education, spread propaganda, destroy labor rights, erode the environment, perpetuate biases, and promote eugenics. A recent report from MIT highlights how the use of AI can actually lead to cognitive decline. A push for the use of AI in education undermines the learning processes and expertise of educational professionals. We continuously see the harms of the spread of disinformation and propaganda. It's only getting worse with AI-generated content. The harms to the environment continue to increase. Recent stories highlight how AI data centers in Texas are using 463 million gallons of water, and the residents were told to just take shorter showers because AI obviously being more important than humans. Citizens in Memphis are unable to breathe freely due to Elon Musk's data centers there polluting their living spaces. We know that systems are designed to perpetuate biases, and AI continues to do that while providing the tools to enhance the biases and use them now even more so to target populations. As researcher Kate Crawford points out, these biases can be used for fascist movement, used to demonize outsiders, track populations, centralize power, and claim neutrality and authority without accountability. Another recent example of AI tools being used specifically to promote technofascism is the recent executive order to prevent so-called woke AI. As seen with Elon Musk's Grok, the AI on Twitter X, changes to AI can be made to encode the political beliefs, even if, and more, it seems, especially if those beliefs are incorrect, misleading, and just plain racist. As Ryan Cooper points out, training LLMs to be anti-woke actually activates every antisocial association in the English language, including racism, sexism, cruelty, dishonesty, and Nazism. So these are things to consider when we are talking about the use of AI, because these systems do exactly what they were meant to do. This is not a mistake. This is their intention. And I will move on. Next slide. A few more references and resources, the quotes there, and then also a shout out. I am a member of Library Freedom Project. You'll be hearing from a number of us today. We have some great resources on some questions to ask about AI. And I am done and moving on to my fellow panelists.
Hi, everybody. I'm gonna just start my timer to make sure I keep on track. There we go. I'm Steve Fernandez. I use he, him, his pronouns. And as Andrea had previously mentioned, I'm here just representing myself. I don't represent any other institution or organization or anything. So I'm here to talk a little bit about AI from my perspective as a person who does engineering. In my field, there's a lot of enthusiasm for AI. People are excited. Engineers are excited about the potential for AI to aid in the discovery of cures for diseases, to help solve climate change, to resolve all manner of social problems, transportation, conflict, crime, so forth and so on, and more. But I also work with grassroots activists, community members, and organizers who have deep concerns about harm from AI. From bias to loss of privacy, as Katie mentioned, to use of uncompensated work, to job displacement, to dangers of AI fabrications, also known as hallucinations, and to its environmental footprint, use of energy, use of water, and so forth. So what mix of hope and risk can we expect? Next. Thank you. So I think the sense of where we're going, we get that from looking at who's leading AI work. There's a number of researchers and engineers who are doing academic AI, but the top AI companies are dominated by a demographic that's generally white, cisgendered, wealthy males, the tech fascists that Katie had mentioned. Women, Black, Latina people, trans people, people from communities with low wealth are underrepresented. And additionally, AI experts, those who finish with degrees in AI, are not going into research, they're going into the private sector, the for-profit private sector. And when we look at what's happening in terms of the research, the money for the research, while a lot of money goes into defense and autonomous systems, So far, only a small amount, like about 2.2%, went into healthcare, and not much that's even noticeable for other potential benefits, such as climate change, solving climate change, and other useful applications. So there's a lot to be concerned about where AI is going, but I want to focus on one particular aspect that I find particularly disturbing. Next slide, please. I want to focus on AI's use for war and punishment. AI is being increasingly embedded into policing around police departments throughout the United States. It's used in the form of online monitoring, public surveillance, so surveillance of the public, and for predictive policing. So I have a little quote on the bottom from the Through the Looking Glass, where the Queen talks about, well, there's the King's Messenger, and he's in jail now, and the trial comes next week, and last of all is the crime. And I was asked, like, what if he never commits the crime? Well, it's even better. That's my concern about predictive AI. We're putting people in the carceral system, and disproportionately is going to be marginalized, vulnerable people, Black and brown people, without them having a fair shake at and being disproportionately impacted, negatively impacted. With respect to militarism, it's skyrocketed over this last year. There's been a surge in AI through war from all the tech giants, Andrew, Anthropic, Google, Meta, OpenAI, Palantir, and more. Things like Lavender and Where's Daddy, where they target people and then attack them when they're going to their homes, have led Gaza to be declared an AI laboratory. So it's very disturbing and very dystopian. So next slide, please. So what can we do? In my field in engineering, there's been measures that have been taken so that technology does not harm the public. If a building is being constructed, it has to be done within constraints of safety codes. Similar constraints exist for electrical systems, for the development and processing of chemicals, for the handling and testing of biological organisms, but nothing exists so far for AI. The UN has suggested some language about do no harm, but in the United States, we've kind of gone backwards, as Katie said, as Katie mentioned. They're this libertarian removing the barriers to American leadership that's trying to accelerate just any type of AI research, and then the no woke in AI, and I think that means like green lights, white-centeredness, and racism in AI. So what can we do? Next slide. So I found that a lot of young people that I speak to actually are enamored with AI and kind of criticize me, like, why aren't you against calculators? And AI is just like a big calculator. Well, if we could connect trillions of calculators and enable them to automatically target and launch military attacks against civilians, I'd be against them. And I go extend it to even broader to hammers. Like if we have hammers that are used for building buildings for people to have affordable housing, I'm all for it. But if they're being used to knock down houses where people are living and destroy communities, I'm against it. And I'm going to say that we should have constraints on the use of hammers. So so what do we do? Next slide. I'll just finish with this next slide. I think that the answer is AI for the people and by the people. The private sector is directed by profit over human impact. It serves the wealthy, and it's anti-democratic and often ego-driven. And even academic university research is driven by availability of funding and technical myopia and decontextualization. Marginalized and vulnerable populations are not often underrepresented. But with people's research and development, I think we could have democratic decision making. Could be focused on serving marginalized and vulnerable people. It could be contextualized and cognizant of broader impacts, and it could be done sustainably. And with that, I will pass it on to the next in our team.
Hello, and thank you to Katie and Steve for highlighting the harms of AI. As part of wrapping up our panel, I want to emphasize the importance of governance and civic responsibility as it relates to system design and the choices around adoption or implementation. So AI, when discussing the development and integration of digital tools, including artificial intelligence systems and technologies, it is absolutely essential to consider the context, which includes history, systems, power, and consequence. These elements are crucial not only in terms of intent, but also in understanding the impact of these technologies and also what they enable and reinforce. Understanding this is critical, as it should then inform how AI is governed, spoken about, considered. So governance is important as this leads, and why governance? So governance is important as it leads to permission, consent, and ultimately to determining whether there is a publicly shared will. We need to recognize that in our current environment, here in the US especially, AI and tech is a political project, and public governance matters. As my co-panelists have been saying, and I too along with them, AI and big tech operate outside of the bounds of democratic norms. They operate in policy frameworks that prioritize profits and extraction and libertarian ideologies. Our current US policy landscape does not protect public interests and individual privacy rights. So, next slide, please. It is my opinion that signs of a healthy and inclusive democracy require social infrastructure to be governed and determined by the public interest and will. In our environment, that would be through the public sector and a robust democratic process. Public consent and governance, not corporate and technocratic interests, must guide any development, implementation, and integration of systems used to power our lives, and that includes AI. Social systems are well served under the public control due to transparency, accountability, environmental realities, and inclusion. Our current reality, as well as our trajectory, is very different. Tech development and the private sector operate in a black box, meaning we do not know how systems reach its conclusions. Further, due to the inherent flaws of how these tools are developed, the processes, decisions, and biases baked into AI systems are hidden from public view. Deregulation reigns supreme. Auditing is nearly impossible. And innovation in this context is deeply anti-democratic. The development of AI isn't driven by public interest, but it is by corporate power, military funding, and environmental exploitation. In order to respond to tech expansionism, it is important that advocates maintain focus on policy, choice, and governance. Software and platforms change. The problem is our broader social and policy environment that allows for mass surveillance and extractive systems to flourish. Instead of discussing which platform to ban or to adopt, we should be asking, do we even want this? What is the cost? Is it even necessary to solve the problem at hand? What can we do to improve our environment before we adopt another solution? Many of these solutions begin with and return to privacy and consent. Next slide, please. AI and the narrative around it is not just about generative and/or computational systems. It is about power and the context of our environment. AI is not an inevitability. It is shaped by human choices, power structures, and political will. The power to control our collective fates belongs to those who are impacted by its outcomes, to those who create it, maintain it, and experience its impacts. Our social infrastructure and democratic process should be above the systems we deploy, not the reverse. The fight for control over our environment and privacy rights is at the center of the solution to combating AI and/or responding to big tech expansionism. In my opinion, our current approach to teaching and the narrative around AI overly emphasizes adoption and harm mitigation, leaving out teaching empowerment, consent, and consensus building. AI is about power and governance. As librarians, educators, we must focus on administration, privilege, and consent. We have a responsibility to teach empowerment, not simply how to be passive actors in a world. As a society, it is imperative that we collectively and democratically assume power and responsibility over the tools governing our lives. So with that, I turn the mic back over.
Thank you. That wraps up our panel. And to get in touch, here are a few contacts. Sorry about the screen share. But there you go. And I'll move on and stop sharing.
Thank you so much. Turning it over to Karyn Pomerantz.
Okay. Thank you very much. I will take the first slide when it's ready. The topic of this talk is the dark side of AI, labor, capitalism, and inequalities. I am a longtime member of the Communist Progressive Labor Party, and the more I research AI, the more I know that I'm really opposed to it. And I'm very grateful to follow so many wonderful presentations today. This presentation will take a broader view of AI. It will talk about its relationship to capitalism and the necessity of a revolution to replace it and make AI and other technologies useful for the working class. And just to start off, next slide, please. I do not think that all of AI is evil. I think there may be things that are useful. And actually, the first robot, the Unimate, was produced in 1961 and was featured on the Johnny Carson show. And so this is not definitely not a brand new thing. And it's been useful to predict when maintenance is necessary. It's useful in handling repetitive actions, reviewing lots of data like in medical healthcare, EKGs. And I confess I use it for one thing. If I write something that seems very awkward, I will invoke Copilot to rewrite it and then be very, very careful about proofing it. I would never use it to create any kind of content whatsoever. And I try to minimize my kind of accessibility on all the social media. Okay, so next slide, thank you, is what is the relationship between AI and technology in general to a capitalist system? We have a system that's controlled by a very tiny, wealthy class that exploits anything for profit, but primarily it exploits labor. It never pays us for the value of what we produce. And it influences who has power. We have to ask whether it promotes equity, whether under a system, if there's scarcity, people share in that. And when there's abundance, people share in that as well in an egalitarian manner. Does it exacerbate or reduce inequalities that exist between Asian, Black, brown, white, indigenous workers and different genders? And what Stephen brought up, which I think we need to pay more attention to, is does it increase the risk of conflicts and war, especially with China? Next slide, please. I love this graphic, and you may have seen it before. This is the pyramid of capitalism. So it's really a wonderful depiction of the hierarchy of a class society. So you can't probably read this, but at the bottom is the large, diverse working class, that's us, who creates everything of value. And next up, above them, are the rich people. And it says, these are the people who eat for me. when they're protected by the cops, the military, and ICE, who will kill for the rulers, and the clergy, who promise us heaven if we obey the law. And it's headed by the bankers and CEOs who determine who lives or who dies in their pursuit of money. And I think Kat did a fabulous job on ableism and techno-ableism on this topic. Some figures of industry's involvement in AI shows that it's an incredibly important aspect of the economy. We'll see how it holds up. There's a huge market for AI products. So they were invested like $6 billion in 2024, and they expect to reach $70 billion in 2032. 86% of North American manufacturers rank AI as a top priority for them. Next slide, please. We're going to consider some of these issues: unemployment and displacement of workers, the kind of working conditions that people experience, the inequalities, a little bit on the environment, which has induced migration all over the world, and the topic of conflict and war. So next slide, please. The first topic is the question of jobs. And the 2024 Pulitzer Prize winner in economics, Thomas Johnson, wrote that unskilled and mid-level workers are going to be supplanted by technology while the elites thrive. Automation without new tasks for humans, you're going to get a lot of unemployment, de-skilling, people pushed down to the lower end of the labor market. The consequences are going to be much more unequal and much worse for more people. Next slide, please. Okay, this is what really grabs my attention. It's the working conditions that people endure to produce the things we need to create AI and other digital technologies. And the picture at the top shows what a cobalt mine looks like. It's massive. And on the bottom, we see very young children lugging minerals, and women on the right also engaged in this work. Now, what's horrible about it, many things, is it's extremely dangerous. Young kids climb down into very narrow tunnels that commonly collapse on them. Entire families are involved, so kids are not going to school if there are any. These mines are mostly in African countries, specifically the Democratic Republic of Congo. There are frequent injuries, maimings, amputations, and deaths in these tunnels. And women are exposed to uranium that is very toxic to fetuses. And keep in mind, there are no unions. They don't get any health care. There's no regulations. And the common wage is $2 a day. So you can imagine how desperate people are to earn that. Okay, and I don't know if people have read the book, but there's something called Red Cobalt, and it's about the mining of cobalt for digital products, and it should be in every library. Okay, next slide. Okay, there we go. I'm not going to dwell too much on this because AI production really represents the common inequalities that we see in everyday life and in all other jobs. Overall, female, Black, and Hispanic workers are underrepresented overall, and specifically in managerial positions. Women are still close to only 20% of the high-tech workforce, and 40-some% are ages 25 to 39. Okay, and next slide. It's still true with AI and all other technology for written documents is garbage in and garbage out, and that still exists. I think Stephen also referenced President Trump's executive order on AI, and specifically he said that the government will not contract with any businesses that have any DEI within them, within their products. And so that will affect, millions and millions of businesses. In medicine, doctors have fought and changed the algorithms that go into determining what groups of people will get kidney transplants. And as you may guess, the kidney function values were different for whites and for Black patients. And that pushed Black patients further down the waiting list for a kidney transplant. And I'm happy to say that there was a big fight over that. The Kidney Foundation endorsed the change, and the VA endorsed the change, and now it's common. So if you go in for a blood test and you see a result called EFGR for African Americans, you need to question that and oppose it. Go on. Next slide, please. Okay, so the image on the left is an automated interview when you are discharged from the hospital. And I experienced this a little while ago. They wheel in this computer that's connected to a Zoom, and actually I don't even know if it's a live interviewer, but she or he asks you all the typical questions that a nurse would ask, leaving time for questions and answers. And it may be accurate, but it's incredibly dehumanizing. And I think there are a lot of examples in healthcare that are high tech and low touch, like language lines. Yeah, you can get a translation, but you don't interact with a person. And I think that lack of human touch and interaction is a big concern. In terms of learning, general AI encourages rote learning. It lessens reliance on critical thinking. And overall, I think we have to consider that the goal of education in any society is indoctrination. They want to produce people, definitely workers, who are obedient and with the program, and they don't want to create people that question anything. And we see how successful this indoctrination is within Israel, where people are taught from an early age to hate Arab people. We see it in the United States for sure, with Trump especially, and in most countries. I mean, that is the role of education. Okay, next slide, please. I think we're going to have a much fuller discussion about the environment, so I'll just mention a few things. But the production of these server farms displace people and forests, and when you encroach on forests and destroy them, you release a lot of wildlife that are associated with epidemics. So it has a direct effect on people's health. It uses a massive amount of electricity, and keep in mind that electricity uses fossil fuels, and they expect the amount of electricity to double by 2026, which is next year. These server farms, you see a little picture of it. It looks like IKEA on steroids. There are stacks and stacks of computers that are called the cloud, to kind of cloud over what they really represent. In order to cool them down after all this power, it requires a lot of water, and that water comes from the water that we use for consumption. So it's very, very dangerous to our water supply. It will affect the environment in big ways. 100-word email in ChatGPT uses water that's equal to a bottle of water. And that is magnified by millions of people. And that will definitely contribute to all the horrific environmental disasters that we're seeing now coming to the United States, which will provoke a lot more migration. And you've got to ask, you know, where can you really go? There's really no other choice but to stop this. Okay, next slide, please. I think what concerns me the most is that we're on the path to war, and AI is a big part of that. On one hand, the drones powered by AI locate targets, whether they're bad guys or the good guys, but mostly they're civilians. And it also requires a lot of weapons, of course, beyond drones. And Israel is a chief exporter of AI-driven weapons. And there are a lot of campaigns going on actually in the United States and here in Maryland to refuse to fund the companies that are supporting this production. It also reveals dissent. It's very easy for AI to generate profiles of people who are opposed to the system, who are fighting against wars and genocides and other things. And we're seeing people being abducted regularly. On the consumer side, which I experience more than anything, is this, it identifies your shopping trends. You have to be very careful about what you buy because it'll come back to haunt you. And it's totally annoying. It uses algorithms to send you recommendations for entertainment and for other consumer goods. And, you know, it's very kind of interesting to see how quickly they can identify what you could be interested in. On the other side, that's complementary. It also increases the likelihood of war. And in one way or one reason is that there's increased competition for these rare minerals that are needed for workers and for trade channels. So the South China Sea around the Philippines is a contested area with China because it's access to trade routes, and also there's access to workers. The Philippines employs about 100,000 AI-related workers. And when you think of China, some of people think that China is a very progressive government, a socialist government. But you have to ask, would a socialist government own these mines in the DRC, in the Congo, that exploit the working class so severely? And I would say it's not socialist whatsoever. It does have a soft side to its imperialism. It funds roads and other infrastructure projects in Africa and Latin America. It's called the Belt and Road Initiative that you may be familiar with. And it claims to be a benefit to these countries, whereas it does charge interest rates, and it uses this project to ingratiate itself against the United States. And then there's a very strong likelihood that all these conflicts, including those about trade, will lead to war. Now, it's true that it could occur without AI, but AI makes it somewhat more efficient. Okay. And next slide, please. Actually, there are two of these, so go ahead. You can go to the next one too, there. Okay. Well, on the good side, there's a lot of resistance. There's union resistance. The International Longshoremen Association went on strike for higher wages and working conditions. But one of their demands was that the companies would not use AI to displace them, And even when these companies offered them really good wage settlements, the workers still refused to accept the contract. In the Philippines, there's an active militant movement and coalitions against the exploitation of workers. And I think we saw recently, or last year or 2 years ago, there was the big Hollywood writers' strike, where writers and performers and artists refused to let companies use AI to duplicate their images and to basically not pay them for their labor. And next slide, please. So this is really what we need to do. There are many, many more of us than there are of the bosses. And we have to figure out a way to come together and to challenge the system. And I know a lot of people have been talking about, well, how do you reform things? How do you make things better? I don't think there's any way to really make things sustainable and better under the system. Basically, if we want to reform, it's taken away down the road. And to me, the basic issue is how workers are exploited, how we are used to work and produce the value in society and not get paid. And the only thing that addresses that is really changing the class that's in power. So on the next slide, I ask you to consider a communist or socialist form of society and to question what would be the expectations we have that could use AI possibly and other forms of technology for the common good. And I'll just offer the way I think about this. I'm sure there are many other ways. But under that kind of society, we wouldn't have bosses or wages. Because when you have wages, you stratify things, and you have some people who get more based on what they do and how they're educated, instead of based on what people really need. So if you're a large family, you have a larger home compared to a smaller family. When there's scarcity, which there will be after a revolution that's violent, you have shared and collective decision-making, and you share in that scarcity, and when things are better, you share in that abundance. You would have safer manufacturing processes because it's not based on making a profit and getting people to work faster and less safely. I think the thing people think of about automation in general is that we'd have more time to enjoy ourselves. We'd have time for sports and leisure, entertainment, and what's really important is socializing and developing personal relationships, which we're often very rushed to even consider. So overall, there's more opportunity to improve life. That means to me more libraries, health clinics, and schools. And overall, internationally, we'd have more unity, less conflict, without borders or walls. So I just want to read a comment from an article. As we've seen, technology under capitalism enriches the rich and impoverishes the rest of us, either by displacement, by automation, high costs of digital products, or lack of access to high-speed internet. In this society, every necessity is turned into a commodity, from electricity and cell phones to healthcare and food. If the working class had control over technology, we could design systems determined by need instead of profit and exploitation. We have to talk about what that would look like, and we have to recognize that it won't be created with ChatGPT. Thank you very much, and I look forward to hearing your ideas. Oh, thank you, Derek and Olivia.
Thank you, Karyn. So our last presenter for this session is Brandi Hart. Brandi, go ahead.
Hi, thank you so much. I'm going to go ahead and share my screen. Well, thank you everyone so much for joining me today. I'm Brandi. I'm an interdisciplinary librarian at the University of Colorado Boulder, and I'm also completed my second master's degree in epistemology, ethics, and the philosophy of mind and cognitive science at the University of Edinburgh. So today I'll be talking to you about the ethical ramifications or consequences of the use of generative AI. And we are already, unfortunately, in the position of consequences rather than implications. Now, you might be thinking, Tiger, ethics, AI, what do any of those things have to be doing with one another? And here I'm borrowing an extended metaphor from Dr. Geoffrey Hinton, also known as one of the godfathers of AI. I just really love this metaphor he had. He is very important in the development of neural networks and deep learning, which has given us most of the foundational groundwork for the AI that we have currently. He was last year's Nobel Prize winner for his work in neural networks. He was asked this past spring by CBS in an interview to describe the present state of generative AI, and he said, "The best way to understand it emotionally is we are like someone who has this really cute tiger cub. Unless you can be very sure that it's not going to want to kill you when it's grown up, you should worry." And AI is most certainly in its infancy. ChatGPT this November will be turning about 3 years old. And obviously, tigers are adorable when they're babies. They're not at all the 600-pound wild animals that they become. And in this way, too, AI is certainly in its hype era, right? It's your answer to a better life, a more organized one, maybe a better organized and efficient library, and really quite charming and fun still. As our baby tiger, or AI, is growing up, ChatGPT this February had 400 million users, and just 2 months later, that number doubled to 800 million users. And for scale, that's about 10% of the entire world's population, which is massive. AI is also getting integrated into more and more software tools. You can use yourself as an example. Think about how many AI tools you currently use, or how many software tools that you've been using prior now have an integrated AI tool feature. You can think of Zoom even as an example today. When we all came in, there's now an AI companion. Before we move on too far, we should probably address what is AI. Now, with ChatGPT making AI on all of our maps, we tend to kind of use the term AI to describe ChatGPT or any sort of other generative AI, when in reality, AI is actually a field of science concerned with making computers or machines that can match human performance or complete human tasks. In other words, act human. The B term of AI is actually still entirely hypothetical. We have not reached that yet. So you can think about it that AI excels in tasks that are very specific with clear goals, since it can only mimic thought and human reasoning. In other words, you can think about AI as an unprecedented form of agency, the ability to act and manipulate the physical world that is actually devoid of any intelligence. This is important because as this new form of agency is getting further integrated into many facets of our society, it's being used to make decisions and tasks on our behalf, we must provide clear, good human objectives to guide our use of it. As I said earlier, we're already experiencing the consequences of having no ethical framework for AI. So how do we create an ethical framework for AI? Here we're going to need a little bit of philosophy, specifically ethics. Ethics is a branch of philosophy concerned with investigating the concepts of good and bad, right and wrong, both as concepts in and of themselves and in relation to human behavior, which is what we're interested in. Specifically, it helps us identify actions that are good and bad, and most importantly, why. It provides us with the rigorous criteria to distinguish what constitutes morally good action, such as a good use of AI, versus a bad action. We can think when developing our ethical framework first and foremost of who or what is worthy of our moral concern. Ethics has had a history of widening the lens of who we think is of our moral concern. It may have started right with members of our tribe or the people in our community. Then it expanded to humanity in general, that all humans deserve moral concern. Then we thought, well, animals are also living beings capable of suffering. And finally, now we think of the environment as being worthy of our moral concern as well, even though they're non-living elements and presents a non-anthropocentric framework for us to proceed with. I like environmental ethics specifically because it provides the widest aperture lens in order for us to capture all social inequalities and all members that are worthy of our moral concern. It also sees that nature is intrinsically valuable in and of itself, not just a resource to be exploited for human means to an end. Environmental ethics also helps us in our ethical framework think about the timeliness of our decisions and how our current decisions now and actions will deeply affect the future generations of our planet. We should aim then to create a society that values human agency, especially increasing in the face of increasing artificial agency. We should also care for one another and have a deep responsibility for humanity, both currently and for our future and the natural world. Now, you might think, well, that's a good lot of philosophy, but why does this matter? I'm going to borrow and build off of a metaphor from one of my favorite philosophers, Dr. Luciano Floridi. You can think of innovation such as AI as our foot is on the gas pedal and we're going very fast. Good laws then should be our hands are on the wheel, steering us where to go. I like to think about ethics as both the values and the groundwork for the human project. In other words, you can think of ethics as mattering as the map of where are we even going in this car. Ethics exists independently of the law. We shouldn't think of the law as the stopping point for ethics. You can think of the example, right? It is not illegal to cheat on your wife, but it certainly isn't a very good thing. We can look at the Coldplay Gate example as a bit about that. Ideally, however, good laws, regulations, and policies have a sound ethical basis in them. But there's a problem. We have two vacuums. One, we currently have no comprehensive US federal law to regulate both the development and usage of AI, so we have no hands on the wheel. In addition to that, we have a vacuum from the AI companies themselves not prioritizing ethics or safety in their development of such products. OpenAI, for example, the company that owns ChatGPT, has abandoned its safety initiative dedicating 20% of safety research and have prioritized shiny product production over safety culture and research. In addition, Google has walked back its promise to not use AI in warfare, in creating weapons, and in creating surveillance tools. With our ethical framework in mind, we can categorize AI usage into three categories. A good use. A good use is a good human objective achieved by usage of AI for the betterment of humanity. We can think about accelerating drug formulation using predictive AI, such as the tool AlphaFold. A bad use, so bad actors using AI for bad purposes. You can think about cyber criminals automating online identity theft or despotic governments using AI to surveil minoritized populations. The most important use that we'll be talking about today, and the most predominant one in society and in libraries, is overuse. A generally average task that can be done perfectly well by a human, but AI is instead used with no substantial human objective in mind and no substantial human outcome. The overuse of AI in libraries and societies, you can think about AI-generated writing, using AI to write your emails, your schoolwork, research papers, using it to answer reference questions, summarize articles, papers, or books for you. You can now see this in a number of our databases as a significant feature now. AI productivity tools to plan your day or schedule your library events using AI virtual assistants, or AI-generated content for social media or marketing. What are our values then? If we go back to our ethical framework, that values are what guide our actions. When we value overuse, what is the value? In the age of instant gratification, we value convenience above all else. AI makes things easier and less effort for us, faster and more efficient. Companies certainly like it because it's cost beneficial. Companies, libraries, schools, etc., can save on money by not paying their current workers any longer or hiring entry-level workers. In other words, our values are profit-driven and laziness. Now, what are the consequences when we don't have a good ethical framework to guide our use of AI? The problem is that we tend to exacerbate old ethical issues, including social inequality and environmental destruction. Now, while there are many consequences of AI overuse, today I'll only be discussing two. One with regards to the harmful effects on the job market, as well as environmental destruction. So our ethical question then to guide and analyze our overuse of AI becomes, does our convenience supersede people's rights to labor opportunities and an environment that can support our current and future generations? The World Economic Forum estimates that AI will displace roughly 92 million jobs. Particularly, it will wipe out white-collar jobs and could spike unemployment in white-collar entry-level jobs 10 to 20% in the next 1 to 5 years. Specifically, entry-level positions will be cut and are at risk. And obviously, massive unemployment and job displacement will destabilize the world economy. Particularly, college grad unemployment is the highest it's been since the pandemic in 2021, with the rate being at about 5.8% in our first quarter of this year. And underemployment, when college graduates are working in jobs that typically do not require a college bachelor's degree, has rose to 41.2%. Importantly, this report does not capture the current May 2025 grads, so these rates are likely much higher. You can think about it too. Being a young person, you're disproportionately affected at this in starting your career and trying to get your foot into the job market and not being able to. Not only that, but it presents an existential problem for our young people when you're pretty much told societally that your skills don't matter and a machine can do better than you. What do you have to work for? Going back to what I said, when we don't have a good ethical framework, that we tend to exacerbate old social issues. One of the particular problems with regard to jobs and AI automation is that AI automation particularly is risky for women's jobs specifically. In fact, women's jobs in high-income countries such as the US are at risk for a high automation potential. Specifically, women face a 9.6 AI automation risk. In comparison, men only face a 3.5 AI automation risk. This not only increases the gender gap in employment, but also puts women at a further disadvantage both socially and economically. However, we shouldn't just say that it's just these two groups that will be affected. Honestly, anyone in a white-collar job is going to likely be affected by AI automation. Any document or spreadsheet-related work can be easily done by AI. And in fact, entry-level jobs and mid-level work both decreased at around the same percentage at about 20 to 25%. And companies have taken note of this to restructure their corporations on what they call a more financially logical basis, wherein they eradicate essentially all mid-tier workers, hiring only a couple entry-level workers who use AI to do mid-level work and have just a few senior staff to oversee them. And we shouldn't think either that we as librarians are immune to this. We fit right into the categories I've talked about. We are a white-collar profession that's traditionally been held by women, with an emphasis on clerical and customer service work. We can think about how reference could easily be replaced by a chatbot. This brings up questions, though, that who is liable or responsible for the chatbot if it provides false information? The library, if you're a public library, your government, the AI company. With this in mind, though, just how effective is this new AI worker? A new study in Denmark found that, in fact, for most white-collar office jobs, AI chatbots only saved workers 2.8% time, and that efficiency or productivity gain did not result in higher economic benefits. And in fact, too, AI tasks actually created more tasks for workers. It created 8.4% of new tasks for the whole workforce, even amongst the workers who weren't using AI themselves. In addition, an IBM survey of 2,000 CEOs found that only a quarter of their AI automation projects were actually a return on investment. And they admitted to investing in AI primarily to avoid fear of missing out. So as librarians, what can we do to support this inevitable destabilization in society? First, we can think about what program we can do to help job seekers. We can think about job boards, resume CV review. Think about building a professional clothing closet in your library wherein patrons can borrow clothes that are business casual for their interviews. We can also develop good collections supporting job seekers to help them learn new skills or go into a new profession or fill in skills gaps. And perhaps most importantly, we can be an empathetic, supportive person in their corner. Obviously, the job search process can be long and stressful, let alone if you are laid off due to AI automation. That's a very demoralizing thing to experience. Now to move on to AI and specifically our little baby tiger cub and how hungry it is for electricity usage. AI and energy are inextricably linked. With no energy, there is no AI. As an example, asking ChatGPT just one question uses as much electricity as running a light bulb for 20 minutes. For scale, that's 10 times as much electricity as normal Google search. And electricity is predominantly fueled by the burning of fossil fuels, so coal and natural gas, which are the primary drivers of climate change. Now imagine those 800 million, or 10% of the world population, using ChatGPT and how much electricity they're consuming. In fact, a typical AI data center consumes as much electricity as 100,000 households in a year. Here you can see the first line, a conventional AI data center using 100,000 households worth of electricity. The hyperscale and the largest announced is actually about 5 million households worth of energy per year. As I said a bit earlier, in its operation phase, it's extremely energy heavy, but it's actually energy intensive at every single step in the AI supply chain. It starts here with the production of specialized GPUs or chips for AI. And this has a lot of indirect emissions from coal-powered electricity, which brings up to a higher emissions footprint. The next most intensive phase in AI production is the training phase. In fact, the International Energy Agency estimates that ChatGPT's newest GPT-4 was trained for 14 weeks and used about the same amount of electricity as 28,500 households in an advanced economy such as the US. Not only is AI extremely electricity dependent, it is also very hungry for water. Water is needed for AI chip manufacture as well as for cooling servers in the data center. And in fact, the IEA estimates that a hyperscale data center, such as the one that we saw before in the US, consumes about 2 million liters of water a day. That's equivalent to the water use of 6,500 households. And as AI demand only increases, and as in society we use AI more and it gets integrated into further tools, this could rise to be about 1,200 billion liters of water a year in 2030. The problem with this, particularly with electricity, is that greenhouse gas emissions are not concentrated to the area where they're emitted. They're diffuse and affect everyone on a global scale. So they don't always affect most severely the areas in which they originated. And while most AI companies are centered and concentrated in the US, both companies and individuals contribute to greenhouse gas emissions. So even our own individual AI usage can cause harm to others across the world and in areas where climate change might be felt more severely. This requires all of us, both companies and individuals, to take our responsibility of taking care of the environment and being good stewards very seriously. As demand for AI only increases, the incentives for using clean energy goes down. In fact, in 2023, Google walked back its promise for maintaining a carbon neutral net zero goal. While it still hopes to aim for that goal, it was no longer, with the demand in AI, able to maintain its operational carbon neutrality. Fossil fuel is the biggest source of electricity for data centers in the US at 40%. And with the passage of the One Big Beautiful Bill Act, it has rolled back many of the tax credits that has incentivized clean energy, such as wind and solar, again, meaning less incentives for companies to pursue renewable energy. As electricity demand is likely to grow for AI in the next 5 years, it's estimated that it will double within the next 5 years, with the US being the largest driver of the increased electricity demand for AI data centers. And in fact, in 2030, it's set that we will consume more electricity just for data centers alone than for the production of all other energy-intensive goods combined, including aluminum, steel, cement, and chemicals. So what can we do to combat this? First, we can limit our own AI overusage and think about our ethical framework and our ethical question to guide our own use of AI. We can help educate our library patrons and local governments about the risks of AI and irresponsible AI usage. A lot of our patrons are very curious to know more about AI, so we can keep on AI news ourselves, develop educational programming and collections that are informative, and also make infographics to educate our patrons throughout the library. I also highly recommend you to call your state representatives and urge for the creation of state laws regulating the use and creation of AI, as well as AI safety offices and committees. There's also a really interesting lawsuit coming out of Hawaii, wherein an environmental lawyer, Tamlin Hunt, is actually suing OpenAI due to safety and environmental concerns. So I do recommend you to check that out. Now, I know today we talked about the consequences and that can be a kind of demoralizing or disheartening conversation, but I actually think we have an amazing opportunity in our hands. We have the opportunity right now to shape our future with AI in an ethically responsible and careful way. Careful both in thinking this through carefully and with care in mind. We can help to create and maintain a society that values human agency in the face of increasing artificial agency in order to preserve our human opportunities, livelihoods, and dignity. And we can be careful stewards of the environment, both for ourselves and for our future generations. So to tie this all together, let's keep this tiger cub a baby with some very strict ethical guardrails, instead of letting it grow up to be the man-eating wild animal it could be, running rampant with no rules. Thank you so much.
Thanks, Brandi. Wow, great presentations, everyone. Thank you all so much. So just a quick note about the time. We don't have nearly as much time now for our Q&A portion. Any presenters, if you're up for answering questions that might come up that we don't have time to answer, if you're up for putting your email addresses in the chat so that folks can reach out, that would be awesome. No pressure, but I'm sure folks would appreciate that to continue the conversation. So we did have a couple of questions in our Q&A section. First was for Karyn and anyone else who might want to answer. Do you think that there is a parallel between Marx's description of proletarian assembly line workers becoming part of an artificial intelligence, aka assemblage, and the way that workers are being incorporated into the global AI production line? And if so, does this indicate any possibility for destabilization from the inside? I think this question is really a great encapsulation because y'all kind of, the way you talked about AI, it's such a bigger topic than just AI itself. So Karyn and anyone else who would like to chime in on this, any thoughts?
Sure. I'll try to do it justice. I think there are definite parallels. There are different modes of production, you know, in the 19th century, we had factories and we didn't really have any kind of automation at that point, and now we do. And so the ways that we produce things have changed. However, the people who produce the things are the same. They're workers. They basically, as Mark said, they sell their labor so they can get enough resources to survive. Some people survive better than others. So it doesn't exclude people who are high-paid workers. We all still have the same relationship to the boss, to capital. And I think we definitely have so many opportunities. And as hard as things are for people around the world today, we really have an opportunity to organize and to increase our numbers and to revolt. And I advocate for overthrowing the system because I think that's the only thing that can be sustainable. I think we have a lot to learn from the mistakes that communists have made in the past. They certainly have, and we're trying to study them and learn from them. And we can see there's an uptick a bit in the union movement in this country. I was very impressed by the response of people in Los Angeles to rounding up immigrant workers. I mean, that was incredibly inspiring. And when I wrote in the chat something like, we have nothing to lose but our chains, well, some people are going to lose their lives. And I think, the more vulnerable we are, the more likely we are to fight back. And we have to figure out how to do that. What is the role of libraries in fighting back? I think ALA could take a leading role in coming out against the genocides around the world, certainly more than one, in defending people who are being arrested on campuses and just on their jobs. I think we have to be bold, and I don't think we can use the excuse that it's not a library issue. I mean, how can you say genocide is not anybody's issue? And so I think we have a lot to work on, and I look forward to seeing that. And I really feel a lot for people in the younger generations who have to navigate this world and figure out their place in it. But I think fighting back is probably one of the most ethical and satisfying things that we could do as individuals and groups. So thank you. I hope that answered it.
Thank you, Karyn.
You're welcome.
Anyone else have thoughts they wanted to chime in with?
I guess I can add here. I think from an ethics standpoint, what I would like to suggest is that we both think about the values of ethics. So we can think about that. Again, I'm borrowing a metaphor here from Dr. Flaherty as the clean, safe drinking water. And we can think about the infrastructure through which ethics is employed in society as the pipes that lead the water so that we can drink it. Sometimes we have both a problem in that our water is not clean, right? The values that we have in society are not good. And sometimes too, we have a lack of infrastructure for them to actually be enacted in society. So I think we need to actually address both of those issues with regards to AI.
Thanks for that, Brandi. So I'll move on to the next question that we had in the Q&A. And folks, if you do have any other questions, please, now's the time to throw those up in the Q&A and we'll try to get to those. So this question is regarding the higher AI automation risk for women. Is that because of the jobs that women are doing, for example, nursing, or are women discriminated against in the same positions as men? For example, female library assistant versus a male library assistant. Anyone like to tackle this one?
I can, or would you like to, Karyn? Okay.
No, good.
I think it's a combined issue here that's sort of compounded onto itself is one, yes, actually, I think it does have to do that women are predominantly in clerical data entry secretarial roles still, even when we've been trying to, again, get women into better places societally and get more job equality, but that's still something we have to work towards. In addition, I think it is that we tend to exacerbate old ethical issues, right? So it's easier for us to let go of women in women's jobs. And there's a really nice example actually about how a couple companies after AI automation, the reorgs have left predominantly men in their 30s, while women and older people particularly are the ones that are getting laid off. So again, I think it has to do with how society sees the value of certain people and their work in society.
Definitely. And I just want to add on that, on top of all these roles on the job, women are expected to create the next generation of workers, and to take care of the home, to take care of the family, all unpaid labor. And that is just oppressive. It limits women's ability to engage in different struggles as well. So it really robs us of a lot of creativity and participation by women. And this is, for Black women especially, this has been going on since the inception of this country. It's a little bit more recent for white middle-class women to have to work outside the home and take care of the home. And I don't know how people do it.
Thank you for that.
Yeah.
Any last thoughts before we close out this session? A lot to think about here. A lot of good food for thought. All right. Well, it's 1:30 Central now, so I think we'll go ahead and wrap up. But I just want to say thank you to all of our presenters and to everyone who came out for this session. Thank you also to our CERT team for handling tech and chat. Just remind folks, CERT is committed to ensuring that all of our programs are diverse, inclusive, and free for attendees. To do that, we rely on support from ALA, membership, and direct donations. You can help champion our roundtable's mission by donating at the link provided in the chat and or by joining CERT as a member. We would definitely love to have you. You can make a general gift at that donation link or select the CERT task force or the award that you wish to support. Please help us maintain our high quality programming, core values that sustain it, and our commitment to accessibility by making a donation, becoming a CERT member, or helping to spread the word about our roundtable and events. Thank you again, everyone.
Thank you, Olivia. Bye.